We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. And right now, the story unfolding around Donald Trump and the war with Iran may be one of the most revealing moments of his presidency, because suddenly, after days of escalation, chaos in global markets, and rising fears of a wider Middle East war, Donald Trump is signaling something that looks very different from victory, something that looks suspiciously like surrender. Just hours ago, Donald Trump personally called CBS News and spoke with senior White House correspondent Wei Jiang. In that conversation, Trump made a claim that immediately sent shockwaves through global markets. He said the war with Iran is, in his words, very complete, pretty much complete. Trump went even further. According to the remarks reported from that call, he said Iran now has no navy, no communications, and no air force, claiming the United States is already far ahead of its expected war timeline of 4 to 5 weeks. Think about that for a moment. A war that threatened to ignite the entire Middle East, suddenly declared essentially finished by the same man who helped start it. But this is where things start to become strange. When Trump was asked about Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the former Ayatollah, Trump dismissed him with shocking arrogance. "We won," Trump said. "I have no message for him. No diplomacy, no strategy, just a declaration of victory." And yet at the same time, Trump casually revealed something deeply unsettling. He said he already has someone in mind to replace Iran's leadership, but he refused to say who. Think about what that means. A sitting American president openly discussing replacing the leadership of another sovereign nation, while claiming the war itself is basically over. History has seen this playbook before. Regime change disguised as liberation. Military campaigns sold as short operations. Wars that start loudly and end quietly. But perhaps the most revealing detail in Trump's remarks had nothing to do with military strategy. It had everything to do with money. Because earlier that same day, global financial markets were collapsing. Oil prices were exploding upward. Stock markets were falling across the world as investors feared that a prolonged Middle East war could disrupt global energy supplies and trigger a major economic shock. At one point, crude oil surged close to $120 per barrel as fears spread that shipping through the Strait of Hormuz could collapse. Remember something important about that waterway. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical energy choke points on the planet. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes through that narrow stretch of water every single day. If it closes, the global economy feels it almost instantly. That is why markets were panicking. But then Trump made his statement. Within hours, everything changed. Oil prices plunged from their panic highs. Stock markets reversed course. The S&P 500, which had been falling sharply earlier in the day, erased its losses and closed higher. The Dow rose. The Nasdaq surged. All because of one phone call, one vague sentence from Donald Trump suggesting the war might already be over. That is the kind of power a narrative holds over global markets. And it raises a serious question. Was Trump announcing a military reality or manipulating financial psychology? Because the timing is impossible to ignore. The market was crashing. Trump called the press. Suddenly the war was pretty much complete, and trillions of dollars in global financial assets changed direction. This is not speculation. This is what the data shows. Earlier in the day, oil had surged toward $119 per barrel. After Trump's remarks suggested the war might end soon, prices rapidly dropped below $90 as traders rushed to reassess the situation. Markets move on expectations, and Trump just rewrote those expectations with one sentence. But the deeper story gets even darker, because before Trump told the world that the war was essentially over, he had another conversation. A private conversation with Vladimir Putin. According to statements released by the Kremlin, Trump and Putin discussed proposals for ending the conflict and potentially working together toward a resolution. Let that sink in. The leader of Russia, a country that benefits enormously from high oil prices and global instability, is now being positioned as a partner in negotiating the end of America's war with Iran. This is not a minor diplomatic detail. Russia has been one of the biggest financial winners of global energy crises in the last decade. Every surge in oil prices sends billions of dollars flowing into Moscow's energy economy. And now the same war that shook global markets could end through a conversation between Trump and Putin. If that doesn't raise alarms, it should. Because geopolitical wars are rarely fought only with bombs. They are fought with energy markets, with financial leverage, with strategic alliances that the public never fully sees. And right now, the public narrative is completely confused. just days before Trump declared the war pretty much complete. His own Secretary of Defense was saying something very different. In an interview discussing the conflict, the defense leadership described the war as only the beginning of a larger campaign. Operations were still expanding, targets were still being evaluated, military options were still being prepared. In other words, the Pentagon was describing the early phase of a conflict. But Trump suddenly says the war is already finished. Two completely different realities. Which one should the world believe? Even international leaders appear unsure. French President Emmanuel Macron reportedly suggested the conflict could continue for several weeks, while analysts warned that energy disruptions could last months depending on damage to regional infrastructure. Meanwhile, Iran itself has made its position very clear. Iranian officials say their military remains strong, their weapon systems are domestically produced, and they are fully prepared for a prolonged conflict if necessary. They also say something that should concern anyone watching diplomacy. They claim there is no room left for negotiations with Donald Trump. Why? Because they accuse him of deception. According to Iranian officials, previous negotiations collapsed because Trump broke promises and pursued military actions, while talks were still underway. Whether you agree with Iran or not, that accusation reveals a fundamental truth about diplomacy. Trust matters, and when trust disappears, wars become harder to end. While Trump claims victory on television, the battlefield reality appears far more complicated. The United States has reportedly lost multiple advanced MQ-9 Reaper drones during operations connected to the conflict. Each of these systems costs millions of dollars and represents some of the most advanced surveillance technology in the U.S. arsenal. Losing them is not the sign of a finished war. It is the sign of a contested one. Even Israel, one of America's closest allies, is reportedly becoming concerned about how quickly the conflict is escalating. Officials have quietly discussed possible exit ramps that might allow the war to end before it spirals into a wider regional catastrophe, because the original objectives of this war were enormous. Destroy Iran's missile capabilities, destroy its nuclear program, cripple its military power, possibly collapse the regime itself. But now those objectives appear to be shifting, quietly disappearing from official statements. And that is something we have seen before in history. Wars start with ambitious goals, then reality intervenes, then leaders redefine victory, and suddenly retreat becomes mission accomplished. Donald Trump himself may have revealed that shift when he spoke to Republican lawmakers at his resort in Doral, Florida. There, Trump described the war not as a global crisis, but as what he called a short-term excursion. An excursion, as if bombing a sovereign nation was some kind of temporary field trip. He praised the strength of the U.S. military and insisted the mission had been necessary to eliminate evil. But he also repeated a claim that many intelligence analysts dispute.
They were going to attack us 100%. They were ready. They had all these missiles, far more than anyone thought, and they were going to attack us. But they were going to attack all of the Middle East and Israel, and if they had a nuclear weapon, they would have used it on Israel. And this was going to be a major attack. And they had all of those missile sites and all those launchers that we got rid of, about 80% of them right now, by the way. Got rid of.
Think about how strategically foolish that is. If your long-term goal is to influence a population, to weaken a regime, or to build alliances inside a country, you do not insult the entire population. You certainly do not do it publicly. But Trump's rhetoric has rarely been guided by diplomacy. It has been guided by spectacle. And spectacle may be exactly what this moment is, because behind the headlines, behind the press conferences, behind the market rallies and oil crashes, one reality remains unavoidable. The war is not actually finished. Iran still exists. Its government still functions. Its military capabilities have not vanished, and its regional influence remains intact. So when Donald Trump says the war is very complete, pretty much, what he may really be doing is something far more political than military. He may be preparing the public for an exit. A quiet exit, one that allows him to claim victory, even if the original goals were never achieved. History has seen this before, leaders who promise total victory, then redefine success when the battlefield refuses to cooperate. And now, after a mysterious call with Vladimir Putin, after global markets reversed course, after oil prices collapsed from panic highs, Donald Trump suddenly says the war is basically over. That timing is not coincidence. That is strategy. The world deserves transparency about decisions that could reshape global stability. And the American people deserve the truth about wars fought in their name. Because if this conflict ends not with victory, but with a negotiated escape quietly arranged behind closed doors, then history will remember this moment very differently from how it is being presented today. We are anonymous. We are watching. If you believe truth should never be hidden behind propaganda, question the narratives you are given, stay informed, and share this message, because the next chapter of this war is already being written.